what I've realized now, I'm not a tough guy, but I'm tougher than you think. And I'm not a soft guy, but I'm softer than you think, and that, I think this acceptance is an important part. Again, seeing things as they are and accepting them, and not necessarily needing to change them, just correcting here and there, and finding balance in your life. Things that are going to nurture your feminine side, things that are going to nurture your masculine side. I'm in Dublin, so I'm here for the next 9 weeks, and yeah, so we're in this hotel, I think, for another week, and then we're moving to another hotel with the actors. So we keep it all in house because we'll be working with them. So they want to put us into a bubble, so we only interact with the same people.
Oh, nice. So what movie or thing you working on?
I can't say what movie.
Ooh, mysterious.
Yeah, that's the deal. That's the deal. Like, I mean, it really came into play a few years ago, where probably about when I first started, like 10 years ago, where they were like, guys, you can't talk about the movie. And then it's so funny now with Instagram and social media, a lot of movies do their own social media, and you're like, hang on, I can't tell my mom what I'm working on, but you're putting a post on The Rock's like live streaming the scene we're doing, like it's a bit weird. But you gotta stick to the rules, just like quarantining here in Dublin, same thing.
Yeah, sure.
You've got to at least show willing.
It's good that things are moving in that direction though, and work's getting back to how it was, right?
Absolutely. Like, it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get back, like when I got the call for work, I was like, this is so good. Just to be back, and yeah, it was a relief, if anything else.
Yeah, nice. But you're in your element.
My brain, I was enjoying.
You're in your element, aren't you?
Well, at the moment I am, because I'm getting to teach yoga, because we're in quarantine. I'm getting to teach yoga online, and I do 2 sessions with the boys here. So one a harder one, and then one for like a stretch out when they come back from their run. So I'm like, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to get paid while teaching yoga and hanging out with my stunt buddies. I'm like, yeah, this could work.
Nice. Did lockdown kind of provide that kind of container to do a lot more online?
Absolutely. Like, it's for most people are kind of detracted from their teaching, I guess. I could never teach at a studio that much because of my schedule. So this became my chance, my impetus to go like, right, let's teach a lot more. Like, now you don't have the excuse of not having a studio you can rely on. You have your studio, it's your front room, and you got all the time in the world. So there's no distraction, So I really embraced it. That's why I taught, 6 out of the 7 days for those 16 weeks. So I really jumped in, and I was like, right, if I want to get better at the craft of teaching, I need to teach more. So that's what I did, because that's where kind of, in terms of other teachers that have been around as long as I have, they've got a lot more hours under their belt because of that. Like, they do it full time,
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I did kind of a bit here, a bit there, then I'd do events and workshops, but I didn't have like that everyday thing, which is what I think you need in any art form, any skill you're trying to learn. You need to be doing it day in, day out.
Yeah, I think there's a fancy quote I could say now, but basically, do more of what you want to do and you'll get better at it, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, Gary Player had a great one, which is that he got a hole in one. People said, "You're so lucky," and he was like, "It's the darndest thing. The more I practice, the luckier I get."
Nice.
And that kind of is what it is. You get better at that thing. You find the nuances, you find the little details, and I certainly felt the difference between having done my teacher training and knowing what words to say when you do it rote, and the difference between when you have a daily practice, for one, or when you're teaching every day and you kind of start to learn what works and what doesn't. So there's lots of ways to say something, and there's correct ways to say something, which still might not work. And the best way to say something is the way in which your students understand it. Doesn't matter if it's Sanskrit, or if it's English, or if it's basic anatomy, or if it's advanced anatomy. Whatever resonates with your student is the best way to say something. It's got to be the students, how can I say, it's got to be the student's best interest at heart at all times. Not how you like to say it, but what's going to get them to move. And I think the wider or more diverse your repertoire of the way to say things, the better you become as a teacher. And that comes from trying different stuff out. And you only really, each class is a chance to try it out. You know, you gotta play within the lines to start with, because you know you get to experiment little by little. You certainly don't want to start teaching, I don't think, by just like going off the wall and saying crazy stuff and seeing what sticks. You kind of, I think it's safe to start with saying stuff that your teacher said before you, and then little by little trying to put something else in. You know, I spoke to Kevin Boyle in length about how when you start teaching, you want to stay on your mat and demo everything for fear of forgetting or for people not understanding what you're doing. And for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but it was a certain lack of confidence in my speaking ability or how succinct I was being to leave my mat. So I needed them to be able to see, hear what I'm doing. But now it's like, look, I trust what I'm saying enough that I'm confident enough. Because people just don't get it. Even if you say it, left foot, someone will always put the right foot forward, you know, and that's okay. But you've got to be confident to be able to go, I can use my words, I can use my actions, and I can use adjusting. That's a whole nother argument now with consent and touching people, but those largely were your three options to do something, you know. But you can also use other people in your class to demo. So I enjoyed this prospect of being able to teach a lot using my demoing, and then sometimes sitting like this. Sometimes I'll teach classes just by sitting and like saying stuff, which puts some people off. Like you can see people going like, oh, what now? Like, just, I think part of it is getting people to trust their own bodies.
Yeah,
you know?
for sure.
Like,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
you shouldn't be looking at me anyway.
Yeah, and that you giving them permission to trust their own selves. I think half of that is they just need permission just to be able to, right? I'm in a safe space. Just safe space is important for every aspect of ourselves, right? You need to improve.
And get it wrong.
Yeah. But
step forward, get it wrong, and be like, oh, that's why. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And also that kind of you get quicker at reading the room. You get quicker at responding to certain things that are happening. Okay, that's not, and then you're just changing it rather than reflecting.
That's it. And I think there's a lot for that, like going, you know, spending a bit of time after class thinking, okay, how did that class go? Like, and not in like a highly critical way, but just think, okay, yesterday was really good. Why was yesterday good and today wasn't so good? Or actually, was it good or wasn't it? What is the metric I'm using to think whether that class was good or not? Is it whether I felt good, or is it whether I was clear enough with my instructions? And it was interesting, you know, I used to have a girlfriend that used to come to a lot of my classes, and we used to see the classes very different. I'd be like, wasn't great for me. She was like, I think you'd be surprised. A lot of people are in their own world, you know? So like, depending on what you're using as your metric, you know?
Yeah.
But I certainly feel now that when it flows, I can feel it. When I'm riffing, it's cool. But, you know, you get different chances to do different things. So.
Yeah, it is interesting. How do you find that like perception of your own self-awareness and to a point self-critic? How have you found that, and the confidence kind of overtakes that almost, and you learn to just trust yourself and trust the process a bit more? But then that kind of navigating that, okay, I'm self-aware, but then everyone's giving me great feedback. Everyone's telling me it's awesome.
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because that's what I used to do. I used to rely on someone coming to me after the class going, that was great. And if no one came, I was like, well, that's a failure. That, you know, I didn't change someone's life today. So that's not good enough, you know? And you forget people have their lives, man. Like they'll come to a yoga class for a yoga class sometimes. And I think what's tricky is if you keep changing, like you never find your way. So by all means, you should evolve, but like have some confidence, like you say, to try something out and stick with it, and have that confidence to like, and find your voice and be like, okay, this is how I teach. And at this point, this is what I like teaching. I know I can teach this well. This is what you're going to get when you come to my class. You know, it's maybe not the most spiritual thing to describe it, kind of like a brand, but when I pick up this can and I see that can, I know what it's going to taste like. and I pick it up because that's what I want to taste and that's what I expect to taste. If I pick that up and that tastes like lemonade, no matter how good that lemonade is, I feel disappointed because I didn't get the thing I asked for, you know? And that's why I think when you start it as a teacher, you've just got to be very clear about what it is you're offering, because you match expectation with the reality, and then I think it's fine. And if people don't like it, they know not to come next time. But if you keep changing your offering, unless that is your offering, that you change it every time, then people are like, oh, I came because last week you did loads of handstands and now you're saying that we're just going to do yang, you know? And the same with class descriptions, I think, are important like that. So I think it takes a while though, because like I say, you want to keep changing and trying something else out, you know, depending on how it goes. And again, at the beginning, I think it's a good idea to find your voice, but then after a while, I've certainly got to a stage now where I have my practice, and I've realized that the most popular types of yoga are almost all set sequences. Like you look at Rocket or Bikram or Ashtanga, and you would think that in a day and age where information is available, that variety would win the game. But in fact, people choose the ones that are the same all the time. They pick a constant, which is very interesting. You know, they pick a method, a system that they can rely on. Maybe that's because there's enough change going on out there that when they come to that thing, they want to know what to expect so they can get better at it. Because that's the other thing. I think students need an opportunity to get better at something, and that takes practice. It takes showing up, doing it over and over again. And if in that class they kind of almost nail that side crow, and then next week you don't do it, they're like, I almost had that, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think that's the way
certainly taken me a while.
That's the way I started, was Bikram like 5 years ago, and I'd never done any of the yoga before. I was in Melbourne traveling, actually. I think it was like 6-7 years ago, and I went to Bikram class, and it was so good that I didn't really feel the need to do anything else. So I just kept on that path for over a year. And because it was feeding me and giving me so much, and I love the reference points you could kind of show moments of improving, and you could really feel into that. And also the mirror work. I mean, I don't know if you work in studios where you have lots of mirrors, but for me back then I was benefiting from that because it was just me facing myself and noticing the improvements, noticing where I was out, because I think modern day humans have a lot of misalignments, right? And looking in the mirror, it was a really good judge, because we're out of our bodies and we're not necessarily tuned into what's almost serving us, you know?
Absolutely. I think that's why, you know, in my stunt work, we have it on this job where we're going to get a load of extras in and have to train them up just to take some basic movements and fighting patterns. And a little bit like when you teach a class, like it's incredible to see how movement patterns, what people think they're doing versus what they're actually doing, there can be a real disconnect. And what we find is when dancers come in, they have a great awareness of their body. They might not do it in the style you want to do, but if you say swing this way and that way, you take a step forward as you do that, no problem. They know where their body weight is. They know where those things are because they have that feedback from the mirror. Dance, they just do constantly in the mirror. So there's a smaller gap between what they think and how it looks. So they're really good to teach how to do fighting, for instance, because fighting in movies is far more similar to dancing than it is to fighting in real life, because you have beats, you have timings, you're working with a partner and you're working together as opposed to trying to smash his head off, you know, although you need it to look like that. So when it comes to understanding your body, mirrors are great, I think. You know, I started a lot in hot yoga, same thing. The mirrors are great because I used to love to go to the edge so that I could have one in the front and one to the side so that I could kind of have reference points in both places. Because sometimes in the packed class, you're like, oh God, I can't even see what's going on. I just had to be careful because I'm naturally quite vain anyway. So I was like, that was a bit distracting. Because I'd be like, God, I'm actually in better shape now. I'm like, no, that's not why we're here. You know, so I had to be careful to like not let it get to that. Or, you know, or you could at least, I suppose, notice that as a distraction and try to get away from that.
Yeah, just observe that that's what you're doing right now.
Yeah. I tell you what I used to like is I used to love doing eagle arms. And then you'd kind of just see one eye in the mirror. And I was like, because then in Bikram, it would often be towards the end of the practice and you'd be tired and be like, I'd look deep in my eyes and be like, you know, let's go. Like there was early in my practice where I approached yoga with the same competitive attitude I approached everything else in my life. I was like, today's going to be harder and better and stronger than everything else I've ever done, you know? And look at all these chumps in the class. I'm definitely better than her and him. All right, what about that guy? Okay, he's quite good, but I think I could beat him. Like, it was back in those days.
Yeah,
you know?
you'll think that, but those old ladies will kick your ass.
Yeah, I remember doing this one at the start. And they were like, okay, now bend to the side, back, forward, hold it. And I was like, there's no way a human could ever hold their arms up that long. Like, you guys are lying. There's no way, you know. I couldn't believe that if my shoulders were the first, I always have to shake out for a while. And then go back up and go, okay, here we go. Go focus, you know. And it's funny, I'm teaching a few of the stunt guys some yoga now, some of the power stuff. They're strong lads, you know, CrossFit guys, ex-gymnasts. And it's interesting to see them just say, like, holding a position. They're like, God, this is hard. You're like, yeah, it's just whatever your body's used to, you know.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that it's better or worse. It's just your body gets used to a certain way.
Yeah.
And then that's what it primes itself. It's an incredible vehicle like that. Whatever you give it to do, it's going to go, okay, we know what to do now.
I love the kind of image of a gym over there, not gymnastics, but the conventional modern day gym, weightlifting, and then a yoga studio, and you've got two different kinds of strength. But you look at them and you think, oh, obviously the gym's going to be all about the stronger person. But you go into a yoga class. I know people have been in gyms their whole life, and it's just a different kind of strength, you know. How was that? How was that for you from coming out of? Because I know obviously you've got a colourful history, but I like the way the conversation's going. So we'll roll with it. Because you got a few podcasts out there as well. Like I always feel like you only need really one podcast out there of someone going into their background, and like without you going into, because if people want to listen, they can go and search your name into Apple Podcasts. You know, the one is it Kevin Doyle, where you've got two with
Kevin Boyle. I've two with him. I mean, yeah, he's a good lad, and like we kind of saw things in a very similar way, and a little bit like this. You started talking to the guy. I'd only ever met him through this medium before I'd ever met him in real life. And I knew from like talking to him, we kind of had a very similar approach to stuff.
Sure.
So yeah, I know what you mean. I'm the same as you. Like, I'll look, if someone's been around for a while, like I had it with Patrick Beach, I'm like, I don't want to start from the beginning again. Like, let's discover something new about this person. So yeah, in terms of like my history, in terms of training, I mean, I was pretty fat as a kid. I was pretty overweight. My brother was a national swimmer. So that was a tough pill to swallow. My brother was like stacked, like huge chest. In fact, interestingly enough, he had a convex. I don't know if it's convex. Yeah, convex.
One of these.
Chest. No, so the opposite to you. You got concave.
Yeah, I've been waiting to get that on the podcast. Yes.
Yes. So he had the inverse of that. So one side is
okay, yeah, no, I've met someone like that before, and we kind of hugged, and it was like this weird moment where you've gone inside me, and I'm freaking out right now.
I'm freaking out. I'm going to stay a little bit longer, but it is weird. So my brother had that, and people used to joke that he had a rudder because he was a very good swimmer. So like, it's unfair because you got this like pointy rudder. But yeah, I was pretty chubby, not particularly athletic, and where I grew up there weren't many sports available. You know, I was in a very small town in Botswana. Football was very popular, but you know, I wasn't wowing anyone with my proficiency in my ability to move.
Why do you think you struggled with your weight then? Was it not, obviously you weren't running away from animals then?
No. I mean, I should have been. I tell you what, in my town I grew up in, twice while we were growing up, there was a pride of lions in the town. So like walking through the town where they tell everyone to stay indoors. So like we did have that fear of that. I had a spinning cobra in my house when I was about 3, a few pythons, a kudu, a warthog killed one of my dogs. Like, so it was a pretty wild place, but I never had to run from them. But I was just overweight. I just had a lot of puppy fat, you know. My dad was pretty overweight. But I think it was natural. You know, kids sometimes just are, you know. Weirdly, I grew up with a kid also from Botswana. We ended up going to the same boarding school, and he was about 5 years younger than me. And I saw in him the same thing. Like, it looked exactly the same. It's like you have this puppy fat on you, and the rest of you kind of get skinny. And then for a while, you look like a toad. Like, you got these skinny arms, but like this bit of a paunch. And it goes, you know, it just naturally goes away. But it was a source of contention for me for a while, and I started playing water polo. So I trained water polo, and then it kind of that really slimmed me down. And then I really got into rugby and gym, and in South Africa, that's a bit of a religion. You know, if you want to be popular, you got to be in the first team. So I started playing a lot more of that, and that all kind of got me really muscular, about a stone heavier than I am now. And then I trained to be a stuntman, and they took us to gymnastics, and I was like, I have all this strength to pick a weight up and down, but it's of zero use in life. Like I was like, and I heard someone say this to me about yoga. She was saying, it's actually the girl that taught us on our teacher training. She was like, what's the point in picking up something heavy over your head if you can't reach your arms over your head? Like that's a natural line for you to be able to do, right? So what's the point in being able to push it really hard if you can't? That's more natural. That's going to be more useful in your life. So I thought that was really interesting. So yoga forever for me has been this way to get the most out of your body, to celebrate it, move in all these different planes of motion as like a little diagnostic. And that's kind of how I used it for the longest time. And now I've realized that the injuries I've had over my life have not been through lack of strength. They've been from lack of flexibility, almost every one of them. So for me, it was like range of motion is going to be so important. And as I've done more and more yoga, now I'm seeing the benefits. Today, for instance, in the gym, I was doing split jerks, which are where you jump, you push up, split your legs, push overhead. And you see people really struggle with this. If they can't have that open shoulder angle, which you need in handstand, for instance, your down dog's got it to a degree, forearm stands. If you don't have that, this movement's gone, because then you have to jeopardize the back to get into place. So I found that the shapes in yoga were so interesting. And the guys in my CrossFit gym back in Surbiton, shout out to Motion CrossFit, great bunch of people. And they were just amazed how many of the movement patterns in CrossFit were similar to that in yoga. And you know, we both discussed it, that it wasn't coincidental, that the body's ergonomics work in such a way that strong stances are going to look the same regardless of what you do. The yogic tradition was smart enough to recognize what those strong stances look like and what muscles engaged would look like. So interesting to see this development. Two things that look like oppositions, to your point about a gym and a yoga studio next to each other. Things that look like they're opposition, like the yin and the yang. The further you go, the closer the two get to one another. So it's interesting to see now. And certainly the CrossFit world are getting into mobility a lot more because so many of their movements require it. So it's great to see, you know, and I'm certainly not a yoga purist thinking that I don't think yoga is the only thing you should do. I think you should celebrate your body in as many different ways as you can. I just think yoga helps you be able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. It's functional movement, isn't it, in general? I think in the West, for sure, we've kind of separated ourselves from hanging around street corners, squatting, and you know, climbing around. As kids, we're kind of a bit more conscious when we grow up. And I think obviously descend from brachiating apes, right? That arm reach, that is a natural movement, and we just don't have that anymore. But yeah, the more we learn about
I get super jealous. I was gonna say I get super jealous whenever I go like Thailand, Bali, and people squatting. I'm like, God damn, I wish I had that.
Yeah,
it looks so good. I'm like,
I've been trying to rewild the squat for a good year and a half, and it's millimeters difference. It's such an important movement. And I know people shout out to Tony Riddle. Do you know the Natural Lifestylist on Instagram?
No, but I like that is going on.
Oh yeah. He's an amazing guy.
Tony Riddle.
He's one of my mentors for sure. I mean, I can guarantee everyone listening to this podcast will know who he is if they know me, because I'm always shouting about the guy. But he's got I'd say his overarching theme is how to live more aligned with nature in the modern day, in the modern environment. So, you know, he lives in Hampstead in London, just off the Heath. But he's rewilding natural movement essentially, and he's all that. And he's actually, it's interesting because the yoga side of it, I've been since 7 years ago, I've been interested in yoga. I did my teacher training last year, started teaching pretty much January time this year. But at the same time, I've got wind of like more natural movement styles, and I noticed, even though I've been learning and studying yoga for so long, my squat is just awful. I can't deep squat, and I can't do certain movement patterns, which in a way are the fundamentals to then help you walk, run, jog. Like Tony Riddle talks, if you can't deep squat, then you're going to have compensations when you run, and it's going to really affect
I've
you.
seen already my foot turns out already on one side. I'm sure because of that. And it's funny, I've been looking at a similar thing with FRC, with that functional range conditioning. And that's a lot what they go after. They go after basic movement patterns to decide whether, a squat is what you want to be attacking if your range of motion, your ankle or your knee isn't there yet. Because like you said, you could do the squat, but it's gonna look different. It's not going to go in the perfect ergonomical way. I've got a compounded problem that I've had my ACL replaced 3 times and my meniscus taken out. So I have a plate in my knee, which doesn't allow me to bend much for the past 90. So like in yoga classes, it's interesting. I don't often like to tell teachers when I'm in a class that I'm a teacher. I hate the expectation of anything, I just want to go and just move and be free. And they'll be saying like, now we sit in child's pose, and I'm like, oh, no, that's not good for me.
Doug will demonstrate this as he's a teacher.
Yeah, my God, no. Do not look at my one. And then the same with hero pose. I'm like, hero nothing. There's nothing heroic about my hero pose. I'm basically a knee stand, and I like lean back. Yeah, but that's kind of what I like about it. It's what I was saying about yoga. It becomes that diagnostic to go, okay, that part doesn't move as much as I'd like it to, but look, this moves just fine. This moves just fine. Because you can get really stuck on your injuries and be like, I can't do that thing. And you forget the 90% of the other range of motions you can do just fine. So you flip the script and you're like, that's a very small percentage of what's going on, and without getting too deep, too quick. And similar to what a friend of mine,
go deep quick.
A friend of mine lost to his mother, and I'd lost my dad. Like before I got, that was kind of one of the catalysts to get me into stunts.
Yeah, he was from Sunderland, I think I heard you mention, which is
that's correct.
Very close by, very close by.
Yeah, and I got a lot of love for the North and Northern accents because of that. Because my dad's accent is very close to my heart, and they asked me, they were like, how do you even start processing that, And I said, the thing is, similar to the injury thing, you look at the death as the most important part of their life. You're like, that's the wrong, look at it as a timeline and look at all the events that happened in your life. His death is the tiny part. There's so much more data to pull on. There's all those moments you had together up till that point. So don't let that be the full stop. Don't let that be the thing that shades all of your other experience. You had good experiences with this person. The death is the tiny part. It's insignificant in some way in terms of the amount of data it is, but it's very significant in the sense that you don't have that person. And I always found that interesting. That's exactly how I ended up processing that death, and it served me well with everything else to kind of get a better reference point on things, to see them in the greater scheme of things, the big picture, as opposed to getting that blink of focus on one thing.
Perspective is the most important
That's
word.
actually the word I was looking for. I could not think of it.
Oh, really?
It's somewhere there.
But I think I would hedge my bets and say that that's made you a better teacher, like surrendering to that injury, surrendering to that, okay, I'm not able to do this. So therefore, I probably have a lot more compassion for people, for one, that aren't able to move in certain ways, but also just to just accept that that's you and that's what it is. I can still be a teacher. I can still do all these things.
It was a huge source of contention for me. What you're saying is completely right, but it took me about a year to get that right, because what I did instead was I would shy away from doing any stretches that involved the knee, because I didn't want to not be able to demo. And I was like, I don't know how to navigate this if I can't show it, and can't show it the perfect way. How the hell am I going to teach it? And then, like you said, it makes you a lot more compassionate for people. You realize people come to your class, the vast majority of them aren't super supple yogis. They come in because they want to learn, and even those that are there, I think it's just important that the different options. And like you're saying, it makes you more compassionate, and it's taught me all the different ways to do something. To go, oh, by the way, if you've got a knee issue, I'm in your world. Check this out. Try this. Does this feel better? Because this works for me. It gives me that insight, because I'm not sure about your career, or rather your path as a yoga teacher or yoga student, but I had a lot of very flexible females teaching who said things like, Now just push your right leg forward and your left leg back. You're in box splits. And I was like, I don't think I am. I don't think I'm anywhere near. And
I'm still in a handstand.
They would have a hard time. They would have a hard time understanding how I couldn't be.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I'm
Dancers,
telling you.
mainly dancers. I had a teacher in London in what's it, the Life Centre, and this one teacher, and I love her to bits. She was an amazing teacher, but she background was dance, and I was like, God, it must be really hard for you to relate to you know, to people who aren't flexible and who haven't got open hips.
Yeah, because for them it's easy, right? And you know, it's a good learning curve to go. And I like that I'm not naturally flexible, because I've had to learn the tricks along the way to see what works. You know, I like that I don't see myself particularly gifted in terms of movement. It's been like just a constant like try stuff, and like you said, an acceptance of where you are. That's a huge one. You know, I've been reading a lot of the Bhagavad Gita, talking about how we don't own the fruits of our labor. Do the thing because you enjoy the thing. Don't do it because you want the result, because you will then you checkmate yourself into the situation that when you don't get your results as quick as you want, you start to hate the thing you're doing. Mm-hmm. If you like the thing you're doing, the side effect is you get better, and that'll come. And then, like to say, you get these little yoga gifts in class. You know, like you were saying with Bikram, you show up one day and you're like, I can do this now. I couldn't do this, and now I can. But I certainly didn't go into a class going, today I'm going to bloody do it. You know, you just do the thing. You keep in mind all the different processes on the way. Okay, hold here, kick through, stand up. You're like, oh, look at that, it's there now. Because like everything else, it's fleeting, right? That moment of success is like, oh, I can do it. And you're like, okay, what else could I do? Almost immediately. I'm like, okay, I can hold the handstand. What else? And so if you're always chasing that thing, it's, you know,
it's the goalposts.
Idea of
they just move. They move. Like I talk a lot about goals and doing things which don't really require me to have a goal, just allow me to be. And yoga is one of them. It's hard because of our competitive nature. And when you talked about, well, I say competitive nature, survival is competitive, but also it's drilled in us that the love you receive is only the love is actually given to you when you compete and win. So it's like, right, I'm trying to validate myself by competing. And that's so important to learn through yoga, because I got into it, similar to what you're saying earlier, got into it because I wanted a more mindful practice, but I still found myself comparing, being competitive. Like someone's out of breath and I'm not, and my ego's going, yeah, that's right.
Got him.
No.
Yeah, it's you see, I've kind of come full circle with that, because I agree. I think yoga is one of the reasons I loved yoga was because it was one of my non-competitive sports. You know, I was training to be a stuntman. I was doing martial arts. I was swimming at a club. I was doing high diving, platform diving, gymnastics, trampolining. I had this list of things to do, and I had friends that were training at the same time. So I was using them as a reference point of how well I'm doing and how quickly I'm learning these things. And I came to yoga for my days off, and I was like, you're doing the exact same thing here. This isn't a day off. You've just changed the venue. Like, you need to change perspective when you get in here. But saying that, I think you need the balance of the two. I think, as you pointed out, survival is that we have this competitive nature, you know. It may sound funny, but as we were that sperm cell, you're racing for the front.
We won.
You know? So that is our DNA. You know, we're born winners, and that's important. And I think finding that balance between the two is important. You know, I think Confucius and Wu Wei had two different understandings in Eastern philosophy. I forget the name of the guy that marked Wu Wei. So you had Confucius saying that every day you should strive to be better. And you had this other guy, which I remember his name in a second, who was saying you should just let things be as they are. And I think there's somewhere between the two that you want to find things. And for me, that's what yoga is. And certainly how I like to teach my classes is that you have the poses where you're engaging, using reciprocal inhibition. Engage the thighs to relax the hamstring. So a lot of the class is that, where you're holding isometric tension to try open up and release. You're trying to find effort, ease. And then towards the end of the class, you're also accepting, relaxing, letting things be. And I think that's the cycle you want to go through life. Work, when you work, then relax when you relax, and when you don't give each opportunity for each one of those, then I think life can become a difficult place to be, and the biblical scriptures seem to echo that with the I think it's a psalm with the idea of God grant me the courage to change the things that I can and accept the things I cannot. Something along those lines. The surrender to accept things I can't. And I think that's very much what I'm trying to get at with yoga, is that in my yoga, I want that to be a place of refuge and calm, but also I want things that get that fire in me, because I like that animal feeling. So when you're hitting a bag or you're weightlifting or you're running, like I like to get animal, and I like to have the two, Like I said, I'm not a yoga purist. Some people may say that yoga is the only thing you need to do, and it may work for them. But for me, I like to have the two. I don't want to become too lackadaisical or too relaxed. In the Jungian sense, I want to integrate my shadow. I don't want to just get rid of it. I don't want to not have a dark side. I want to have a dark side, but have it under control, like a Rottweiler that's trained really well.
Yeah, I think that's where, and this has come up so much lately, probably just because I'm delving into it. And one of the massive reasons why I wanted to get you on, because I think you do have that balance. Life is about balance, essentially. I mean, we've all got the equal amount of light and an equal amount of darkness within us. But there's a lot of craziness in the world because we haven't got a good relationship with our shadow. So we're seeing that inner shadow just reflect outwards. And I think talk about it in men's groups a lot, and it's so relevant, because if people don't realize and just accept that, okay, I've got these dark aspects of myself, and I need to just, when they come to the surface, just be more aware of them, and a bit more have a practice that kind of allows them to just be observed and just be there for what they are. Yeah, but
I go on. Sorry, Chris.
I was just going to say, like, probably a question for you, that masculine and female energy, and not in the sense of lip gloss and beards, as in the energy sense. I think you have a really good relationship with those two. And do you think that comes from gymnastics, working through your body, and then the masculine animal rugby guy?
Do you know what I can tell you? It's an interesting thing. I'm certainly obsessed with it, like this idea of masculine and feminine. Like I have these tattoos on the left and the right. Everything on the left is for my mom. Everything on the right is for my dad. And everything on the right is symmetrical. Everything on the left is chaotic. And that was born very much out of listening to Jordan Peterson talk about order and chaos and the Taoist symbols, and how even as you get to the bigger side of the black circle, you have a spot of the white. And this idea that you should live your life between the two, which is again this Taoist understanding of Wu Wei and what Confucius was saying. But this order and chaos is masculine and feminine. Again, people often mistake this for male and female, and it's not. It's literally masculine and feminine. You've got Mother Nature and Father Time. You've got the structure and you've got chaos, and it's this intertwining that real amazing things happen. I always remember hearing Aerosmith lead singer Steven Tyler saying the creative aspect of writing Dream On was they locked themselves in a room and took LSD for a couple of hours, or 8 hours. And they were pressed on it. He was like, you came out with this amazing song, so it must have been worth it, all that chaos. And he was like, yeah, the problem is we came up with 6 or 7 songs like that, but no one could write it down because everyone was so messed up, and to me, that was a perfect example. So you have this chaos, which is very creative. And that's like a lot of creative types are like out there because they don't follow the rules and they color outside the lines, and it's great, but then they're not great with their taxes or their selling of their art, and I think you're trying your best to try find something in between the two. There's that Venn diagram where the two overlap somewhere. Certainly in my life, and I've spoken to this quite often in length to friends of mine, where as growing up, I was very much a mama's boy. Like the feminine side in me was, in my opinion, too high. I was super sensitive. I was, I was very involved in people and not so much things. And yeah, just for one, super sensitive, a hopeless romantic. I don't know if it's because I grew up with certain music. You know, I was really drawn to acoustic stuff like Goo Goo Dolls, and movies that were really popular when I was growing up were a lot of rom-coms like She's All That. And I had this real, I think, warped sense of the world. You know, it wasn't a realistic sense of the world. It was a very romanticized idea. And I think to my detriment a lot in my life. Uh, Becoming a stuntman was kind of this movement to the other side, and I think I overcorrected for sure for a long time. I became quite callous, certainly in my relationships with people. You know, both friends and then romantic relationships. You know, people found me cold, which I always found interesting because, you know, the critique with girlfriends of past was that I was too soft, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And I think that's when it was around that time I found that Jordan Peterson talking about this balance between masculine and feminine. I was like, yeah, this is interesting. And then yoga was an interesting thing for me too to be doing. And now I think it's so weird that my life is almost a manifestation of that. The stuntman side is this like uber masculine, you know, at least on paper. You know, I can tell you I'm definitely not one of the most masculine out here. Some of the guys I work with are legit the real deal, you know, tough guys. What I've realized now, I'm not a tough guy, but I'm tougher than you think. And I'm not a soft guy, but I'm softer than you think, you know, and that, I think this acceptance is an important part. Again, seeing things as they are and accepting them, and not necessarily needing to change them, just correcting here and there and finding balance in your life, things that are going to nurture your feminine side, things that are going to nurture your masculine side. I think what we've seen in terms of how society treat men now, I think is an interesting thing going on. And, you know, a term I don't like hearing that much is toxic masculinity, because often when I hear it used, they don't refer to toxic masculinity. They just refer to masculinity. They refer to things that come to men naturally and they go, that's toxic. And I think in a society where the biggest killer of men, I think over 25, is suicide.
Mm-hmm. More than
I'm
wars
thinking
and natural disasters combined.
disasters, you know, mental, an amazing fact, right? And I think you're living in a society where part of society is saying, look, guys, you're not man enough. And the other part of society is saying, you're too manly. And we squeeze men into this position where it's like, what are they supposed to do? You know, what are we supposed to do? We're getting told that what comes to us naturally, we shouldn't be doing. And then we're getting told that we should be changing. And I think, I don't know that that's right, but I certainly feel like that's not helping, you know. And certainly I think things like what you're doing, stuff like men's groups, letting people talk about it and discuss and be able to nurture both sides, I think is important. You know, we have this aggression side, and I think it's no good telling society that men should just forget that they have aggression in them. I think it's redirecting that aggression, or at least accepting that they have this aggression in, and putting it into other things. I think that's the important thing. As I was saying earlier, those are energies. Feminine energy is one thing, masculine energy is one thing, but it's how you choose to use your energy, how you cultivate it, not just try to suppress it. Again, to Jordan Peterson's point, bad things happen in the shadows. When you push things into the shadows, they don't go away. You know, like mushrooms, they tend to grow and get out of hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just on that point about the crazy statistic that there's more men die of suicide than natural disasters and wars combined. It's actually the mind that is the biggest enemy, and not having that relationship.
That's the battlefront.
That's the battlefront right there. It's crazy. You're back to the Jordan Peterson, I think, and that's why I gravitate towards your content and you just in general, because you've got to go there to know there. And Jordan Peterson talks about that. All right, work all night, just work till you just literally drop, and then you'll know your boundary. And I feel like you've gone to that extreme in both ends to find your middle, you know?
Yeah, it's been an interesting thing, and like I said, it's great to have thinkers like him around, and to at least, you know, it's great, and this is what's great about this open format like these podcasts, is you get to discuss these things where we don't often get to talk for long enough to think things through. And terribly, another concern of mine is the cancel culture also doesn't allow you to think things through while talking about them. You know, in order to come up, when you're thinking about hard things like this, you have to feel like you're in a safe place. You spoke about this before. When we teach a class, we give that safe place for people to make mistakes so they can go, oh, okay, maybe that wasn't quite right. Maybe I can do it better. But when we start to make people so fearful of saying something, and that's not to say we don't check people when they say things. It's not allowing them to have that forum even to speak, to say that whatever you're saying now is wrong without listening to them. I think puts people into a position where they can't even make the mistakes. And again, you force them then into the shadows. And in the shadows, bad things happen. You know, light is the best disinfectant. Let people say what they think out loud. Let them air their grievances. Let them talk it out so they can see where they are without the fear that someone's just going to jump on them and call them something that is horrendous. I truly believe that most people are good-natured. You know, the stats speak the same. Psychopaths, sociopaths make up a very small amount of people. Most people are trying to navigate the world and do good things.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the more we believe that, the more we treat people like that, the more they'll surprise us and they'll follow suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just look at prehistory and where we've come from, and then take a little walk. Then take a little walk outside, and you think, Jesus Christ, all these people, you know, wearing different clothes, quite different in the way they do things, and everyone's pretty much just going about their day, getting on. I don't see.
You know,
Bill Hicks has got that amazing thing. He's like, famine, war, depression. I don't see this.
they'll make you believe that it's the worst time to live ever, and you're like, I said to my friend, we were walking through. Yesterday was Sunday. A lot of stores were closed, and we were walking past a lot of stores with a lot of nice things in them, with glass fronts, right? And I was like, I mean, this is mental. Like that's probably 10, 20,000 pounds worth of things in there, and all it's stopping us having it is the glass, and no one goes to take it. You know what I mean? Like we have that self-control. I believe in humanity. I believe in society. I think we're doing all right.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I would say that coming back to your point about men and suicide and just generally how people can better control their emotions, I just think for sure yoga is great, but I certainly think meditation is something we want to start putting in more and more into schools earlier. I'm watching my nephew and they do a bit of meditation. And I just think like it's taken me 37 years to get to a point where I give myself some space and do some meditation, which I think just gives me the introspection to help me navigate life. It doesn't fix things, but it helps me at least give me space to think things through before I do things. And it gives me that emotional stability. It helps me sleep, which helps regulate things. And these are all things that I've had to learn now, you know, and I've had to go through some horrible things on the way. But I just think if kids are doing this much earlier, if they have that repertoire already, I just think, you know, we're halfway there as society. You know, people aren't making such bad decisions. A lot of the bad decisions people make come from a reaction as opposed to a thought, you know, and the function of the mind is just to think without necessarily knowing where we're putting those thoughts. And if we can just, you know, just move that a little bit, just for a little bit of the day, have a little bit more clarity. I think off, you know, we won't agree on everything, but at least we'll have a bit more compassion as we have more compassion for ourselves.
Yeah, nice. I think it's going to be the single most important thing as we move forward in the future, just in terms of the more we come enmeshed with, intertwined with technology, and it becomes such a norm, you know, we won't know it without it. And meditation's just, I think, have you heard of the book A Beautiful Practice? A whole life approach to health.
It's going down. It's down on the list.
Awesome, mate. Get the audiobook's fantastic because it has a guy narrate one chapter, then a girl narrate the other chapter, and it just flips between the two quite synonymously, and it's beautiful. But it talks about the need for a practice and what a practice can mean, and goes into meditation and lots of stuff. But it's phenomenal. I do think it's just such an important attribute, just to distance yourself from what we believe or we conceive to be the reality of the nature of things. But the nature of things is that everything changes and everything moves from one to the other.
Well, what I find interesting is with how technology is going, I was listening to Akimbo, which is a great podcast, nothing to do with yoga. It's actually Seth Godin, who's like a marketing guru who just has interesting thoughts about things. And I'll get it wrong. I think I'm missing a letter, but it's TP something 7 or maybe TP7, which effectively is a supercomputer that they're building at the moment, which will analyze. I've been on a few podcasts now. I have my own podcast. I've probably uttered enough words for this thing to take all my words, have them stored, and then I can type, or you can type, and it'll say it in my voice. So it can say new words or even words I've said before and utter them. So I can be independent of it, and you could make a podcast with my voice by typing that as a script. This thing will also answer back in a format that they think sounds like me. So you could ask it a question, and it will answer as me because it's learned from how many things I've said. Point being that between that, the face swap thing that's going on at the moment, I don't know if you've seen the app. My friend loves it. You can just put your face on any actor.
Oh
on
yeah,
any GIF.
my friend sent me a Shakira one. He was just,
it's very good.
It's very good.
It's
Joe Rogan
very
put
impressive.
one out as well, I think. Or Aubrey Marcus put one out.
Aubrey Marcus, yeah, I can believe that. And
Yeah.
It just made me think that we're getting to a point now where we were the information age for the longest time. Now we're the misinformation age. Like now we can't even believe what we see if it's on screen. I think what's going to happen is we're going to go back to not using technology as much because we want to see things in person. Do you know what I mean? Because we know we can't believe what we see on screen. So I don't know if we start to then ignore more and more of it because you're like, I don't know, you know, to quote Trump, fake news. You don't, if you can't differentiate between fake and real news, you just don't listen to any of it. You know, and I wonder if we don't then start to interact more in person because we can't believe things. You know, if you've ever had the mispleasure of internet dating, you'll know that photos can be very deceiving too, you know, and you're far better off trusting someone you meet in person to get a real indication of what they're like. You know, people, when they write their own profiles, even when their friends write their own profiles, you're not going to get a real sense of them. So I wonder if we start to turn our back a little bit more on technology. I don't know. In my mind, I just think we're at this interesting juncture between the two, where we're using technology so much, we haven't quite understood what's going on. And in the back of our minds, we're thinking, okay, it's really cool, but at what price? At what price are we paying for all of this, you know?
Yeah, I'm kind of endeavoring to get back into filming podcast. I did one. I started it just over a month ago, but my thing was going to be to shoot like on location, just out in nature with me and another person like this, but we'd be face to face. And now I'm like 7 episodes in, and I'm like, I'm just the Zoom guy. Like,
but Zoom has this ability to, you know, this is one of the wonders of Zoom is that,
absolutely.
You know, we're in completely different parts of the world, and yeah, we can converse. It really opened my eyes up to people I can practice with, as well as, you know, I've always been restricted by who's in my town, who's in London, who's, you know, who can be bothered to travel to. Now I'm like, I can do this in my pants and no one cares, you know. So it's allowed that kind of thing to happen. But yeah, I certainly feel like in person there's a different feel to it. You know, yeah. I like the podcast in person for sure, but it's allowed me to have guests that I wouldn't normally get. So like, you know, I've been contacting people in Bali that I've always wanted to talk to that I haven't been able to.
Yeah, nice.
But like I say, like in person, there's just this kind of, I don't know, it's something quite nice about it too, you know?
Yeah. What was I going to say? There's not an analogy, but the example of exponential growth. And like 50 years ago, that thing that's in your pocket was as powerful. 1,000 times less powerful was a building in size, or like a room in size, and it costs £1 million. So that thing that 50 years ago, £1 million less money, fits into your pocket, was a building in size, and 1,000 times more powerful. That's exponential growth. But we think of it in like years and times and doubling, etc. And it's like, wow, okay, 50 years. Great. What's going to happen?
Crazy. Yeah. Hey, I always think that, like, what is ahead of us, man? And I always think, if this is the technology we have, what are the government rocking? You know, what have they got that we don't know about?
There was a Netflix documentary. I kind of didn't have the intention of seeing the whole thing, but I ended up watching it all, about surveillance. It's Connected on Netflix. And it starts off, I'll say very, very brief because I know I'm wary of time. But yeah, it starts off with these little birds in one part of America where they have lots of hurricanes. So these birds fly south. So they fly all the way to Brazil every year to avoid the winter. So they fly south for the winter and then they come back. Well, what they started monitoring each of the birds, and then they noticed that how long they were away for, or when they left, say they left in June, or sometimes they left in July, would be in accordance to how ferocious the winter was going to be. So it went from that kind of surveillance, using surveillance in a real beautiful way. So we can actually use these birds to predict hurricanes and how crazy it's going to be, because these are better than our weather systems, which is nuts to think about, but that's what happens. And then it went into face recognition of pigs. So animals, looking at animals, how we can look at face recognition in pig farms to then look at the welfare of the pigs, and you could really look into the happiness of the pigs. So that's a really cool way we can use technology to look into how good our meat is, etc. And then that went into humans and humans face recognition, and there was like museums about face recognitions and all of our selfies which are up into the ether, etc. But then companies using face recognition to know whether their thousands of staff are happy, and if they're not putting in the work, and just sends your mind like wild. Like, and that surveillance technology was from the army, of course. Yeah,
it is. It is interesting. That's what I mean. I wonder if at some point we don't turn our back on it, and because
well, there's that privacy.
It's not a stretch.
Privacy paradox where people know what's going on, but they still are okay with it.
Yeah. They kind of accept it for the convenience of what's going on, right?
I'll give all my data away as long as I can get a date.
It's that's pretty much where I'm at. I have it all. I'll tell you, last time I cried. Like, I don't care. But I just wonder, it's not much of a stretch then to go, okay, that surveillance can tell you by a person's demeanor, where they're happy. You can tell what days they are happiest. You can decide what days they're most upset. You can decide what jogs their memory, so on and so forth, right? What happens on voting days when it can analyze your face, send you just the right news clips to push you in a certain direction. So they already know that when we vote, it's emotive. We don't really think about what's best. It's quite an emotional reaction, and it may depend on the day we have. Yeah, you see what I'm saying? It's not a stretch for them to go, okay, well, if we want these guys to stay in, then all we do is this. On the flip side, I've heard, who is it? Yuval Harari say that the real answer then is to fight fire with fire and let AI vote for you. So all the data that's been stored on here, all my purchasing, all my text messages, all my movement, how often I travel, it's going to be able to collate information about me and what's good for me. It's going to be able to then check a politician or a political party's agenda and go, by the way, you may want to vote Democrat, Republican, Labor, or Conservative. However, if you want to live the way you're living, but live better, then you should actually vote for these guys, because it knows you better than you know yourself. Like I was saying about the bio that people write for themselves. We don't know ourselves as well as we think we do. Jordan Peterson says it perfectly. If you want to know what someone thinks, watch what they do. Don't ask them what they think. Because we'll say all sorts of things about what we think, but when you watch someone's actions, you'll really know what they believe. I can say that I believe that you should do yoga and meditation every day, and then I do it once a week, and you're like, well, you don't think that. You think you should say that, but you don't necessarily think that, which is fine. But it's an interesting point and a good differential to have, is that people's actions will give you a far better indication of what they believe and what their values are than what they say.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the time when someone else can really write your bio better than you can.
Yeah,
you're taking all the thinking away, I don't know. Right. Anyway, we can wrap it up there, bro. Respect your time. Respect your resource.
Thank you so much, man. It's really cool to chat to you, and this has been great. It's nice to be on the receiving end of of these sometimes, you know.
Yeah, and let people know why that is.
Wow, that's nice setup there, Chris. Yeah, that's because I have a podcast called Getting Down with Doug. It's sometimes yogis, but it's often my other stunt friends or people involved in film. I'm trying to get my friend who's on this with me, who is actually, he's a stunt guy. If you follow Game of Thrones, he was the Night King. Originally was an actor, and then they didn't like the actor, so my stunt friend became the Night King, and that was his job for a couple of years, which is an incredible. Like, we love to see the stunt guy become the actor, you know, and sit in the high chair and get all the fanfare. He recently just came back from doing a signing with Pamela Anderson, which I was like, this is he's gone and done it. One of us has gone out and he's done it. So if you fancy listening to a wide array of guests with no real theme, then feel free to check into Getting Down with Doug.
Yeah, I love looking through them, because I was like, I know none of these people. This must be great. This is great. Yeah. So yeah, the Down with Doug on Instagram, best place to reach you probably.
Yeah, always the Down with Doug Instagram. The website's the same, thedownwithdoug.com. You can check out retreats. And then at the moment, for the next week, I'm doing a few more live classes. And then when we start filming this new job, I'll probably do the weekend classes still. So just check in there. You'll be able to see week by week. Actually, Mondays I put out what classes are on that week. So check in there.
Okay, awesome, man. Thanks for making this happen. Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Chris.